Hello, film fans. Welcome to the Film vs. Film podcast. My name is Martin Harries, your host. I'm a filmmaker on occasion, but mainly can't stop yapping about movies. On this podcast, every episode I pick a topic from a film that's coming out at the cinema or on streaming. I pick a favourite film from that topic and battle it out against a guest to decide which film will become the greatest film of all time. If you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Please enjoy part 1. Hello, podsters or podroonies, if you prefer. We are back again for another episode of the Film vs. Film podcast. And you might be realizing by the title of this episode that there is a change of plan. As I had a guest drop out, we are tweaking the subject from Ryan Gosling films 2 to Planet of the Apes movies, as Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is out. Yes, I think they're running out of words to put in front of their ape movies. There's been quite a few now. Let me see if I can run a few of them off. Right, so we had the original, then I don't know, what was it? Beyond the Planet of the Apes, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and then the new ones.
There was Beneath the Planet of the Apes as well.
Yeah, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, War of the Planet of the Apes, and now Kingdom. So I wonder what word they're going to put in front of the next one, people, to keep this franchise going. And of course, I'm joined by a guest who is helping me out. Big thank you to Parker from Dissect That Film, and also probably because he was pissed that he lost last time.
Yeah, I'm fuming. I'm still angry.
Apart from your bitter anger, Parker, how are you?
I am doing fantastic. I really appreciate you asking me to come on to talk about really a franchise that lately I have been a huge fan of. So I'm very excited to talk about the world of Planet of the Apes.
Awesome. So if listeners don't already know, tell us about your podcast and where can we find you, sir?
So I am 1/3 of Dissect That Film. We're a podcast that dissects the good, the bad, and the ugly of films. We pretty much break down the plots in our own special ways. Me, my co-host Dan and Angela, we just we have fun talking about kind of, sometimes it's the crazy things that people might not notice in movies in our own humorous ways. Yeah, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. We're on all those podcast apps. We're on youtube.com/dissect that film, where we have our video form of our podcast, and we're on Patreon as well. So you can, and everything is Dissect That Film.
Excellent. Kingdom then. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. What do we make of it?
I'm very excited for this movie. Okay. So as we're recording, it's not out here in the States. I don't know if it's not. Is it out over there?
No, not yet. It's similar.
Oh, okay. I think it was the 10th. Mm-hmm. So I as I stated earlier, when Rise came out, I was very excited for this franchise. I was very excited kind of diving into kind of the world that had been long forgotten, especially since that disaster that was 2001's Planet of the Apes that Tim Burton decided to do. Oh boy.
I literally can't remember anything that happens in that film. It's really bad.
It's a nightmare, but yet I own it both on VHS and DVD. Okay. So maybe one day I'll revisit it just out of curiosity. But seeing them kind of take this very serious approach back to that world and really giving us an origin story to kind of how it all began, I was very intrigued. There are origins that don't need to happen, but I think when it comes to Planet of the Apes, giving us that, what happened in the beginning type story is just, this is a perfect franchise for that. Yeah. And to be honest, a lot of people call it the reboot trilogy, but it's not really a reboot because they've stated that this does connect eventually to the 68 film.
Yeah.
So it's what I call the Caesar trilogy, and it's one of possibly the greatest trilogies ever made. Really? So I'm very, in my opinion, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Each film, growing to what it becomes, and then kind of giving us now this new look into Kingdom. And you give me more Planet of the Apes, I'm in. Even if it doesn't have the characters from the prior 3 movies, I think it's better that way. So yeah, I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'm will be honest, I'm less excited, mainly because you don't have Andy Serkis, you don't have Matt Reeves, and also it feels like from the trailer that this is like the closest we're getting to the original film with Charlton Heston, but without the twist, because we know what happens with the previous trilogy. So I'm like, what new thing are we going to see in this film? And that kind of worries me a little bit.
I think what intrigues me is that, yes, we know what's going to happen because we've seen the original. And if you haven't seen the original, please go see it. It still holds up and is very good. We're going to talk a lot about it. So, but I just like the fact that we're kind of getting new pieces of history in this Apes lore. Yes, we know what eventually is going to happen, but we got the Caesar trilogy, which is kind of the origin of how everything began. And by the time that ends, we kind of get a new chapter. And now this one is supposedly 300 years after the end of war.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that new historical chapter in the, into that Apes lore. And it kind of feels like if you're watching a movie about the Civil War, or you're watching a movie about World War II, or you're watching a movie about gladiators, you're seeing historical movies, but from a human standpoint. Now we're kind of getting that in an ape standpoint, and I find that very interesting. And we're finally getting to see it based on the trailer. We're getting to see the fact of kind of inching our way closer to that original, where you have the apes are more like those apes in the original, and you have the humans that are now kind of apes. They're kind of in the where apes sit for us now.
Yeah.
It's very intriguing. And Kevin Durand is playing the main ape. I don't know if he's going to be the villain of the movie or however he plays. And I just saw him in Abigail. And I've always been a big fan of Kevin Durand. So he's very excited to see how his, stepping in the shoes of Andy Serkis, not playing the same character, but trying to see if he can lead, the new chapter of the Apes story.
Yeah, because that's what's really interesting about these new films is that the apes are the main characters here, not the humans at all. So it'll be interesting how they go about that with this new trilogy, and also just from a industry point of view, the original film is set 2,000 years after or something after our time. Well, the 1970s in that movie, but yeah, give or take 30 years. For 50 years, sorry. Maths is terrible. So, how many trilogies are we going to get before we get to the original? There's a lot of time to play with for the studio.
Right. And I think it's good that they're not just kind of I feel it was good that they waited.
Yeah.
It's been 7 years since War came out.
Yeah.
So it's, we've had time to breathe. And so, I know a lot of people, as soon as they saw a trailer was coming out for a new Planet of the Apes, people were like, oh, but it ended. The trilogy's over. And the fact that they got to come out and be like, it's not set in that time. We're getting a whole new thing. And I think that was kind of the director's whole idea behind it, was I don't want it to continue Caesar's story. If you've seen the movie, I don't want to spoil the end of War, but Caesar's story was told, it ended, and now we're getting to see...
We're moving on.
Yeah, and, even if we don't get a trilogy out of this, based on, how well it does at the box office, which nowadays is very, very hit and miss. People get very excited about going to see a movie, and then, no one sees it, and the box office is garbage, and we don't get any more. So... I'm hoping this movie does well, and we kind of get more story. Based on whatever story it tells, if it's compelling enough, and it does, if it's even remotely on the same level as the prior trilogy we got, which is going to be very hard to do.
Yes, definitely. I'm one of these guys that if the story is good enough and the stories are really interesting, then bring it on. Just keep them coming. As long as they're good, why not? You had that kind of period with the MCU and superhero stuff. There was a period where they couldn't miss. Now they're kind of starting to miss, so it'll be interesting to see if they can keep up this consistency of quality with the Andy Serkis, Matt Reeves films into these ones. I guess I'm assuming that it could be a trilogy. I don't know. It all depends, doesn't it, with Kingdom, how well it does, but but yeah, I agree. I think it's a really good move that they've waited a good 7 years after the last Matt Reeves movie. So, yeah. Right, let's get into it then, people. So I'm going first, and I thought it would be quite apt to go with the very first one, which is simply called, with no extra word at the start, Planet of the Apes from 1968, starring Charlton Heston, Roddy McDowall, Kim Hunter, and directed by Franklin J. Schaffner. And with this one, I saw this as a kid, and I kind of knew the ending already. It's just one of these films where the pop culture around it was so iconic and so available in pop culture that it was kind of impossible not to know what happens at the end. I mean, like, isn't the poster, or certainly in the DVD cover, the Statue of Liberty is on there? So I'm like,
yeah, there's posters where it literally shows the final scene, and you're like,
okay,
well, I wonder if this is the end.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but that didn't really bother me in terms of my enjoyment of the film. There's still a lot of really, really interesting stuff that goes on in this film, and it's got some really kind of quite edgy stuff as well that really surprised me, especially on this rewatch. Yeah. So what happens in Planet of the Apes? Well, an astronaut crew crash lands on a planet where highly intelligent non-human ape species are dominant and humans are enslaved. And also with that, I think with the story, it's very much with a lot of the Matt Reeves films as well. There's a lot of politics going on and protecting the apes culture and conspiracies and things like that. So it's really interesting.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What did you make of this one?
Very political. This entire franchise is very much political. I like you saw this when I was a kid. My grandma actually had like the entire box set of VHSs of all of the original Planet of the Apes movies, and I remember as a kid really enjoying this one. And the rest of them kind of fell to the wayside. Like I had seen them, but they just didn't hit. Yeah. They didn't have that impact because it was just more, I think it was just based primarily on the politics of things, and kind of we're focusing now on the apes kind of fighting amongst themselves and kind of their downfall. And it was, I don't know, I just lost interest in it. I definitely want to go back and revisit the rest of those originals. But going back into it after years of not seeing this, it's probably been since probably the late 90s that I had seen this movie, and really seeing different iterations of a performance that I remembered so differently back in the day, like especially Charlton Heston and the kind of how he is portrayed in the beginning of this movie, and how he is like spins like a 180 as bad things are happening to him, but yet bad things were happening to people in the beginning, and he was just kind of lighting cigars and like, yeah, it's fine, whatever. And then he gets enslaved, and now it's like, oh, how could you do this? You know, we're human beings. We could coexist. Yeah. Like, I'm like, where is this coming from? It was just weird. Yeah. And I don't remember it being that way. I don't remember him being that like cocky and kind of just not giving a shit. I just like,
he's a real asshole in the beginning of this film.
Oh yeah, to be honest. 100%. I mean, it's wild to kind of see like how different this movie was seeing rewatching it again. And but overall, it's a very well made movie. Yeah. Visually, I think the performances, even though he sucks in a way, Charlton Heston knew how to chew up the scenery. Oh, yeah. He knew how to take every scene and command it and really just show people like, this guy's good. Yeah. Like this guy's good. Watch this guy act. Like,
yeah, he's a real movie star, in this period.
Oh, absolutely.
You've got Soylent Green.
Oh, yeah.
Ben-Hur, I've seen those as well prior to seeing this for the first time, and he's just got real screen presence. And as you say, he oozes across the screen. Yeah, with his charisma.
And the fact that you have all the actors who had to be in the ape costumes. Yeah. And it's like, that must have sucked. Like, that must have been a lot of hard work, and kind of, you're trying to act, but you're also being told to act like an ape in a way, but you're also humanoid because you're more evolved. And it must have been really hard for the actors to kind of get into those characters, especially when they didn't really have any reference points like they do now. Like, if you're going to make a Planet of the Apes movie, you can kind of, look back. Like, I guarantee when Tim Burton was making his, he's probably asking actors to, watch the original and see how they acted, because they really took a lot of those characters and reimagined them for that 2001 version.
Right.
But they put Mark Wahlberg in it, and he went, why? Mark Wahlberg is not Charlton Heston. We need someone else, please.
Oh, the poor guy. The poor guy.
I know.
Not in many good
not
films.
Terrible. No. He's not a leading actor, in my opinion.
No. Yes, The Departed is very much his best film, where he's just swearing his
really
mouth
is,
off at
and he
everyone.
is. It really is, and he is like supporting actor. He is that guy. Where does he leave? He doesn't even leave a room.
Yeah. He must have an agent where he's just like, is there another part where I can just swear the fuck to anyone? Please. I'm really good at that.
I'm from Boston, guys. I'm from Boston. Like, I'm good at this. But oh, Tim, what were you thinking? But yeah, overall, I came out of this really enjoying it from beginning to end. There are problems and there are things we'll talk about more in depth as we go through it. But being an adult and kind of seeing things with a different lens, I really appreciated like how good this movie looked for 1968. It's really impressive. It doesn't touch 2001 visually, because that movie is possibly the most visually beautiful film ever put out. And that movie came out the same year. And I'm like, oh, especially when you see space shots, you're like, okay, these came out the same year, but they don't look it at all.
Yeah.
But overall, this was a fun watch.
So directing then, like, it's interesting how the director tries to create like a bit of a contrast in the beginning where you're just like dropped into the ship, like the Icarus. And Charlton Heston is like reminiscing about what Earth was like in his time in the 70s and speculating about what Earth is like now. It's very like calm and quiet as the rest of the crew are in hypersleep. And I did find it funny though when Charlton Heston just puts his seatbelt on to go into hypersleep. But then after the credits, like the ship is like crashing down to this planet and it's all done with this crazy camera and like the POV of the ship. So in some ways I respected that they didn't choose to use like model work, and it may have looked, a bit goofy and bad possibly if they don't get that quite right, especially if they're trying to match that up with how the director was using the POV camera. It could have looked terrible. So I do respect that. So I do respect the attempt to make a contrast of the first scene by being super calm to then, the crash being intense in an innovative way. But one of the shots you see is like the Grand Canyon. So you're like, oh, it's Earth already. Then you have this like intensity again when like the water is rushing into the ship and they're trying to get out. But in the middle of it, there's this big wide shot that comes from like the ship and it's very fluid and pans around, showing you the vast landscape of this planet. So yeah, it's an interesting opening for me in terms of like the rhythm of it and very unconventional directing.
Yeah, I got to agree pretty much with everything you just said. Is that I do like the visuals. It does get a little dizzying, especially that crash sequence, because it's one of those things where I always question whether movies filmmakers make certain decisions to kind of prolong their movie, like to make it longer on purpose, and to me that's really annoying. Okay. I mean, at least for me, I can't speak to everybody because there are people out there who love watching 2.5, 3 hour movies all the time.
Jim Jarmusch.
I don't. I don't. I mean, I will if I have to, or if the movie just seems interesting to me. I usually don't get deterred by runtimes unless I'm at a crunch for time. Yeah. But there are just shots in this movie that really just make me go, okay, can we just move along? Like the crash scene, little too long for me. The especially where it like is showing you kind of it's like spinning around. And then it like shoots from outside in a way, and then it comes back inside and it's doing it again. And it's like, how long is it taking this ship to crash? Because it's showing me that they're really close to that water, but it is taking 5 minutes for it to crash. But that isn't even the most egregious like use of time. It's when they get out and they start wandering the desert, and it's just them walking and walking and walking, and there's not even dialogue, and it's not even the fact that I'm looking at like this beautiful landscape. It's the desert. It's not that beautiful. I'm not looking at glorious landscapes and like, oh wow, this is amazing. It's not like when you watch, Lord of the Rings and they're walking, but it's like this beautiful landscapes and everything.
It's just desert.
It's the desert and rocks.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, can we just get there?
Yeah.
Get to somewhere.
So you probably won't like this next bit then. So when the 3 astronauts land on the planet that has no resemblance to Earth, like, I quite like the fact that they take their time. For me, I like it. Where they're walking through the desert and you have lots of kind of, unconventional camera angles. I do kind of dig that sort of stuff. It gives you a chance to really pick up on the atmosphere of the planet. Yes, it's just desert, but I don't know. There's something about that kind of scene that I do like, especially about older films. And I do like the fact that they keep you waiting before you see anything significant. Somehow they make you finding like a plant seem interesting, and
yeah.
They come across like these cross scarecrows and they look very strange. Then to making like a waterfall feel very desirable with like this very, very unconventional like crash zoom on it. Plus you have these like amazing like wide shots of what looks like just kids following them on the cliff tops, and they like steal their clothes while they swim. So I love that kind of slow pace, and yet there's always something interesting and weird going on to tell the story. Apart from that bit when Charlton Heston is coming out of the pool and he goes towards the rock and stops because if he goes any further, he'll be naked on shot in camera. He's like, shit, I got to stop now.
that whole pool scene.
Yeah.
I'm going, this is rated G. This is not PG.
Yeah.
This is G.
Yeah.
And I'm getting shots of man ass. Like a lot. And there's some shots where I bet you if you paused it, you're getting a full frontal.
Yeah.
And it's wild that they were like, it's funny when you think of like the MPAA, and I don't know how strict they were back in 1968, but you have the MPAA in the 80s being very like cracking down a lot on like gore and how they would like just completely destroy horror movies, with gore and really creative practical kills.
Yeah.
And then you have rated G movies like Planet of the Apes where there is a scene where naked dudes are just swimming around, and there is, like I said, if you watch in HD, you're probably seeing some stuff. Back then, it wasn't as clear, so it was fine for them. But now I was like,
yeah, I suspect they were like, Charlton, go further back. We can see it very clearly. Go back.
I know you want to show it off, but no, not today, Charlton. But no, I agree. I agree with like the subtle like discoveries they make. I did appreciate that. The one thing that made me laugh though, and yes, this movie made me laugh on many occasions because this movie is pretty funny in just some of the blatantly kind of like mind-numbing decisions people would make. But they find a plant. And they're like, a plant. The next shot, they're walking through vegetation that's like it's dark, so I feel like they were like, you're not gonna see it, it's fine, but there is literally grass growing alongside them as they're walking, and I'm like, but what about all that? And then they find another of the same plant. They're like, oh, and I was like, wait a second,
it's a different set, Parker, come on.
This is what I do. This is what I do, Martin. Okay, this is what I do.
Put the scalpel away. But yeah, I agree. I did think when they get out of the pool, it did get a bit goofy when they've got no clothes on and they keep taking the clothes over and over again. I was just like, how many clothes do they have? Like, how many parts of their uniform are separate? It's very strange,
right?
Yeah, and then when they go, through the jungle and they keep finding their stuff broken, it's like, oh, it's broken, and they keep going, and then, and then the attack in the cornfield happens, and that's kind of interesting, where it doesn't really take long for the director to reveal the apes, and it's quite a cool shot of them like riding into shot on horseback, and it's very reminiscent of the scene in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, where we'll talk about later, where they're hunting deer. Here they're hunting humans. there's some really dynamic stuff here where the camera just gets very close to people getting caught in the nets, and it looks pretty dangerous. Nothing too special, I don't think. There's like a lot of crash zooms again and things going on. But what was a bit weird for me was I got a bit lost a few times because they go from like the cornfield to this little cliff face where people are falling off to this other ditch, and we keep switching to each location all the time in this scene. Yes, it felt chaotic, which is what they were certainly going for, but also it felt a bit repetitive at times because often you would have the exact same shot and camera angle repeating, especially on those cliff faces, which was a tad frustrating. So yeah, it was a good scene to begin with, but then it got a bit tiresome.
Yeah, again, and I rated this pretty well after I watched this. I used Letterboxd, so I rated this pretty fairly. But this scene again shows the fact that it's like we're just prolonging something just to kind of add time, and it got to the point where I was starting to hear Scooby-Doo music in my head as people are just running in all different directions, and kind of the same thing is happening over and over. And I'm like, I don't want to turn it off. Don't let it seep into your brain, because it's going to ruin the experience here, because it's a good overall scene.
Yeah.
My critique of this would have been, I wish they would have hid the fact that they're apes on horseback.
That could be good, yeah.
For just a little. I'm not saying the whole scene should have been that, but I really would have loved them coming in. They start attacking, and the movie's called Planet of the Apes, so clearly they're, if you're smart enough to figure it out, you're probably going to figure it out that they're apes. But I think it would have been a really cool reveal. The fact it's like, oh my God, they're apes on horseback. Like this is insane. Like we weren't expecting that, but instead, they just kind of ride in. You're like, yep, nope, they're apes.
It's a pretty,
which is fine.
It's a pretty cool shot, but I totally agree. I think it could have been a lot more dramatic with how they're revealed, and there are a few shots where you just see, the bottom of the horses and things, and you see apes like beating the corn from behind the corn. You don't see them.
Yeah,
that wasn't too visually inspired, I don't think, for me. So yeah, I agree. Like the shot was cool, but they definitely could have done it better. Yeah, and as I say, I agree. Yeah, it went on too long.
Yeah, and the switching back and forth between like this valley to this cliff, like where did the cliff come from?
Yeah,
because the way that this valley looks, geologically doesn't make sense in a way, unless it's like way off in the distance. But like this random, just small cliff where people are just slowly falling off, and you get a couple Wilhelm screams in there. It was pretty like confusing for me to be like this. I'm just kind of studying the landscape.
Yeah, I feel like it's quite a tropey thing in this like era of cinema in like the 50s and 60s with like westerns as well. These big epic westerns. Sometimes I remember one like a James Stewart one and a similar thing, and it just keeps going and going and going, and you see the same shots over and over. I guess it was just a development phase in how to edit these big movies, I guess. I'm not sure, but they definitely had a similar style, and it's very much of its time, I think, that kind of thing. Favorite shot or scene for me, I think it's just a collection of little moments of horror that stood out for me, which I completely forgot about really rewatching this film, and there's a few instances here in this film that was really great, like near the beginning when they wake up from hypersleep and wonder why Stuart hasn't woken up yet, and they just cut pretty quickly to her bed, and she's completely like decayed and dead, which looked pretty creepy to me. Then when Taylor, Charlton Heston's character, briefly escapes, and there's some great like cat and mouse stuff, and again creative camera work, he comes across this like human museum, and we get a shot of like a stuffed Dodge, his fellow astronaut that got shot, and his eyes are like all white, and he looks even creepier than Stuart, to be honest. Then of course you see later that Landon has been lobotomized, which was pretty shocking. So like these moments of horror just show up, and out of nowhere pretty much without any warning, just making this film have like a nice edge to it, which I'm not sure you necessarily have too much in the newer films.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't want to keep having to agree with everything you say, but to be honest, those were my kind of favorite shots because they're true horror moments. You're literally finding your friend stuffed like an animal.
Yeah.
And I mean, you got to think of how this kind of the messaging of this movie, what it portrays is, humans are doing this to, even still today, they're doing this to chimpanzees and gorillas and apes, around the world. And, just for sport or to sell them and stuffing them. So it's kind of seeing it from their point of view and seeing it as like, no, they're doing it to humans now. It's like going to the National History Museum and seeing a lion stuffed, portrayed on a tree like it would in the wild. That's what they're doing here. And to see, he sees his friend with the cloudy eyes and seeing his friend lobotomized with the scar and shaved head and him kind of standing there not knowing what the heck's going on. It's true horror. Again, this movie is rated G, by the way. And those are some pretty horrific imagery. Like I said, Charlton Heston is really, really good in this movie. His charisma, and it just always oozes out in anything you ever see him in. And anytime he is trying to talk to the head of the apes, or he's talking to Dr. Zaius about kind of like explaining humanity to him, and he doesn't believe him because it's been so long, that they've kind of created their own entity and their own set of rules and history. It's always interesting to see, and he's just trying his hardest in putting everything out there. And I think anytime you see him doing that, even though it doesn't make a lot of sense to me because of how we see Taylor earlier in the movie, where he clearly doesn't care about humanity, but by the end he does. It's kind of weird, but Heston really knows how to make you not really notice that because of how charismatic he is, and how like he just puts all these emotions on the table, and he's so good at it. So I think, it's not a specific scene, but I think anytime he is really trying to convince them of why they shouldn't be doing what they're doing, it's always just fantastic.
Well, those all your favorite scenes, those particular ones with Charlton Heston when he's talking to Dr. Zaius.
Yeah, it's the one where he's in his office. And they're kind of just having, and you're starting to see like some sort of turn with Zaius. Like Taylor is really getting through to him a little bit.
Yeah.
But then Zaius kind of turns the tables and is just like, no.
Yeah.
I don't believe you. I think this is just ridiculous. We have our ways of life, and you're not going to come in here and try to change that. You're not even supposed to be talking. Like the fact that he's talking is like this huge thing.
Not
it's
allowed.
Is it witchcraft? Is it like some sort of magic thing happening? Is like, what, did somebody tweak your brain so that you could talk? Like there's this, like all the excuses in the book to like, or just all these trying to reason with why he is able to do these things, how he knows these things.
He's always got an answer for every question that Taylor has.
Everything.
Directing score, Parker, what are you going for?
I'm probably going to give this a 7.5.
Okie doke.
I think there are a lot of great shots, and he really knows how to direct close quarter shots. Like I think everything that was inside kind of like the headquarters, like the cells and them in the courtroom and Zaius's office, I think is all well done. And even the outdoor, like even those opening shots of them walking, even though I'm not the biggest fan of it, it did look really good, especially when it's not always like right up on them. You have some that are kind of zoomed out, so they're very small walking across, and you're kind of seeing that open landscape. Or like sometimes it's dark and you're seeing, them kind of, you're trying to imagine how far they've actually been walking. And even the shot of the ship crashing is really well done. And you just, imagery is well done. Is well done. But prolonged shots, not a fan of that. I do not like walking scenes. I don't. I've just never been a fan of them. And I think that's one of the reasons why I never got into Lord of the Rings, because it's a lot of walking. And I just don't want to see people walking all the time. Also, the attack scenes, another prolonged attack scene where things just kind of either don't make sense or it just takes too long. It's still a very well done shot. Just I think there could have been some cuts that he could have made. And then the ending scene is definitely very cinematic and very beautiful,
iconic.
And the imagery, it's one of the most iconic shots probably in cinematic history.
Yeah.
So, but there's just too many small problems that I think could have easily been fixed, but that's just me.
I think if this was edited, today, this would be like an 80-minute movie or a 90-minute movie, probably. I totally get what you are saying. I think I'll probably go a little bit higher, mainly just because I am a fan of this. I mean, I grew up on a lot of like older films. My dad put me in front of a lot of, these older movies, and I really lapped them up, and the pacing of it didn't bother me at all. I love a good walk in a film. So yeah, I always kind of really enjoy that kind of stuff, and it builds a lot of atmosphere and intrigue about what's going on, and I always really like that. I totally agree with like the battle scene. That goes on too long for me. But it's a very different scene, they're repeating a lot of the same stuff, which got a little tiresome. Again, there's like goofy stuff going on, but there's a lot of inventive camera stuff here with the action when it is specifically on Charlton Heston. And this film is quite brutal at times with the fights. So, and obviously, with the makeup design at the time, it looks really impressive. So I always kind of like to judge these older films in context of when they were made and with the technology that was available to them. So yeah, I will probably go like a 7.9 for me. Not quite an 8, because some of it doesn't hold up really, but the majority of it does for me. Right, screenplay then. What's really interesting about the film in the beginning is as Landon and Taylor are walking through this landscape. We love a walk. They're talking about like the differences in time, which certainly reminded me a little bit of Interstellar, that the current Earth time for them is like 3,000 years roughly, and they've barely aged because they've been in hypersleep. And Landon's character says he's prepared to die and very proud to be on this mission for humanity, whereas Taylor, Charlton Heston's character, doesn't care about what Earth he has left behind and mocks Landon that his statue has probably turned green and no one can probably read the nameplate anymore. And he's someone that's very much looking forward to seeing if there's life better than humanity. So it's really interesting setup here where your main character doesn't want to go home. He's looking for a better world than Earth. And obviously, when we come to the end of the film, it's quite a realization moment for him that that Charlton Heston was right, really, that he didn't really care about what he left behind, and he was proven right. The fact that they did destroy each other, and the humans destroyed each other, and the apes rose up. It's a really interesting setup for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a scene where I feel a lot of people are confused about why he reacts the way he does.
Okay, yeah.
When he sees the Statue of Liberty, I think a lot of people probably feel that he is reacting to the fact that the apes took over the Earth, but it's more he is pissed off at the humans and humanity. Like humanity did this. The humans destroyed themselves and let the apes take over the world. And so I think I always enjoyed. I think probably when I was a kid, I always thought that ending scene was a little too over dramatic. But then seeing it, for this podcast, I think it was an eye opener. It's like, oh no, he's not mad at the apes. I mean, he is. Yeah. He doesn't agree with how they're kind of running the world, but it's more of like humanity had their time. They did what they did. They destroyed themselves, and now there's a whole new species here to kind of continue the Earth, life, and it's really fascinating to kind of see kind of the dramatic change in Taylor. The whole thing where he's talking to which astronaut was he talking to about his statue? Brandon. He literally, he's talking about the statue and how you're gonna you probably have a statue at home, and it's because it's been like 12 1,200 years, I think, or they'd be like 1,200 years old or something like that. Yeah, he's talking about the fact of it changing color. No one cares. No one cares
Not in this time
about you anymore. Yeah. So who cares? They're trying to survive, and he's, sitting there lighting up a cigar, just showing just how much he doesn't care.
Looking cool.
It's funny because you have the shot of him leaving the ship before it sinks, and he looks at the time.
Yeah.
And when you see it first thing in the movie, it's like 2,600 years. So it was like year 2,600 or something like that. And then when they landed, it was like almost year 4,000.
Yeah.
And he does not blink an eye. He just looks at it and goes, huh, all right. And then just like hops out.
Yeah, he doesn't care. And he's that arrogant. He's like,
no, he just
Earth kind of, in a way, he's done with his planet. He's done with humanity. That's kind of his attitude going in. And I can understand why people get frustrated with his reaction to seeing the Statue of Liberty like half buried. But I think there's like a denial thing and just a realization thing that, this all kind of fed into his ego and his arrogance through the beginning of this film with Taylor. Because I think in a very more of a standard Hollywood film, like Brandon would be the hero and Taylor would be the character that gets killed off when Landon gets killed off, well, doesn't die, but he gets lobotomized, but the same thing, you know what I mean, so it's just a really interesting structure to this film. And also when we get to the end, there's no resolution. We kind of get this huge reveal and then end film. You don't really get that much these days, so it's a really brave way to end your movie in the first place as well.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think I haven't seen the other Planet of the Apes movies, the original, however many, it was like 5 of them. So I don't remember how humans mixed into those other movies, but I feel like this was kind of like the conclusion to the human story of the Planet of the Apes, where, he makes that discovery, and yes, we just kind of, the movie ends because we as an audience know that the apes are going to live on.
Yeah.
It's not like he went in there and destroyed all of ape civilization. You got to figure these aren't the only apes in the world. It's like there's an entire planet. There has to be other cities and all that because they are now the new humanity, and so there's got to be this huge world full of apes now. And so, getting to see kind of what you would think would be the end of humanity's story. And now when they do the sequels, you're focusing more on the apes and their kind of story on how they're running the planet, and then how their civilization isn't as different as humanity's, and it starts to crumble. And that's kind of, I'm guessing, and from what I can remember, the slim parts of those movies is kind of how it goes.
Yeah. So when we get into the film proper, where like Taylor is captured by the apes, and during the hunting scene, Taylor gets like shot in the throat, so he can't talk, which is a pretty good device to use for the plot, because I think if the film would be pretty short otherwise if you didn't have that. So in this like period, you have characters like Zera and Cornelius, these ape scientists who become fascinated by Taylor, that he's trying to like communicate and not animal-like at all. And Taylor could be some sort of anomaly or paradox related to Cornelius's findings of a dick in the forbidden zone, which has been discounted as nothing by Dr. Zaius, who also happens to be like the head of science and the head of their faith. So automatically he's very untrustworthy. Plus you have like instances where Dr. Zaius is like rubbing out words where Taylor was trying to like write something in the dirt in that cage. Then Dr. Zaius like crushes this like paper plane, proving that flight is theoretically possible. So there's an awful lot of like questions about what Dr. Zaius is hiding to protect the ape society. So I think that the kind of the upside down nature of this world, and Dr. Zaius like keeping his cards so close to his chest, like keeps you going in this film. So I do like how the intrigue builds towards this character of Dr. Zaius, especially, that it's not just this very like It's not just like an ape society. There's something deeper going on here that Charlton Heston has to figure out.
Yeah, because Zaius definitely seems like a character that knows the history, the true history of humanity and what humans did to apes before apes became what they are in this movie. And it's understandable that he would try to hide that from the rest of his people because, they don't want, I think the fear is falling into the pitfalls that humanity fell into and knowing what humans did to apes before. I think, he has what he thinks is justifiable, but also he's also a cult leader at the same time. And we all know how that goes. Not very well. So I think it's one of those things he doesn't really know how to control his people. He thinks what he's doing is right, but in the end, it's ultimately going to destroy them because at some point things will be discovered that will end all that you thought was good. The end of the movie when they destroy that cave and Zaius pretty much promises Zira and Cornelius that they'd be kind of set free or they wouldn't be persecuted, and then it kind of all turns around on them like, no, I was kidding.
I just wanted to get rid of this guy.
You guys are screwed, and it's like, damn, like it ends on such a dire note, not just for humanity, but for Zira and Cornelius, like these two characters who are just trying to put the truth out there. Like I don't think they're out there to try to destroy ape society, but they're just trying to be,
they're trying to discover the truth, and evolve further from what they already know. I mean, they believe that it's not possible to fly, and watching it, you're like, huh? How do you not know that? That you can fly.
Right. Kind
of these very simple scientific things that are being suppressed by Dr. Zaius because he feels like, he's, the leader of the science place and the faith as well. So he's got a lot of power in this world and just wants to protect it.
Right.
Yeah. And not let, the ape culture crumble with having too many differing opinions about what they should do in the future.
Yeah. It's one of those things where, and we're going to see it in the other movie we're going to talk about, in the fact of like Zira and Cornelius are just being viewed as somebody who are people who are siding with humans. Like humans are bad. Like we hunt humans. Like they're animals, and we kind of get that same exact imagery when we get to talking about Dawn. So it's going to be interesting to talk about that side too.
So, like, towards the end of the film, when, like, Taylor can talk now using that incredible line, "Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape," Dr. Zaius is, like, forced to basically frame Zira and Cornelius for heresy, that Taylor is not an advanced human animal in the ape's eyes, like, that in turn forces Zira and Cornelius's hands by freeing Taylor to discover the truth in the Forbidden Zone, and they find like a talking doll in Cornelius's digging site. So at this point, you're like, hang on, this culture feels very much like a human culture that we, the audience, know, our own culture, our own human culture. So there's a point where, for me, that denial comes into play for Taylor before he sees the Statue of Liberty. Like, Dr. Zaius even tries to kind of spell it out for him. He's saying things like, you're not gonna like what you see out there, and that, the ancient lawgivers said of man that they were warriors who basically destroyed themselves, and apes would never do that. So for Taylor, he's adamant that this world has to be some sort of messed up reverse evolutionary world, even though the answer is kind of staring him in the face, and us as well. So then it's just like, how is this film going to reveal that truth, that it is Earth? And obviously, what better way to use half-buried Statue of Liberty? So, and obviously basically proving why Taylor left in the first place. So yeah, it's interesting how like the final moments of this film kind of play out, because even if you don't really know anything about this film, which is kind of very impossible to not know anyway, certainly nowadays, that you have an idea of where this film is going. It's just how it's going to be revealed. And I don't really have a problem with that at all. It's a great way how they do it. And we've even discussed, it's just really interesting how Charlton Heston kind of reacts to that as well. So yeah, I kind of really like the end here.
Yeah, just kind of seeing, the revolution of Taylor, or the evolution, whatever word you want to use there, and kind of seeing, the true destruction of humanity, and kind of giving you those hints that you really got to pay attention to, that Zaius gives you. The fact that it's sprinkled out throughout the whole movie, throughout the film, that this is Earth, that this is what happened to Earth.
You see the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're seeing things that it's like, you've seen other movies where they go to other planets that have that Earth look to them.
Iceland.
The Alien franchise has done it before. And this is another planet, guys. It looks like Greenland or Iceland. Yeah, we're good. But yeah, you're picking up little kind of hints throughout that, like, no, I mean, like, you have humans on this planet. Like, it's not some other form of human. It's a human. They just are, de-evolutionized, or whatever word you would use there, where their intelligence has dropped. They are now the new apes of the world. Like, apes are very smart, but they can't speak for themselves, or they can't, control the things that are going on in the world. But now, like, the tables are turned. But, like, Taylor doesn't really understand that, even though he's kind of being fed these hints over and over and over again, until you finally, I mean, as soon as he sees that doll, though, I think that should have been like, what? Yeah. How? Like, there's no way this isn't.
Again, I think it's just this denial and this arrogance and this ego that's kind of getting in the way, and that's what's kind of really interesting about this character, that he doesn't want to believe it, even though his whole philosophy on existence, well, his whole philosophy on humanity is that he doesn't like it anymore. He very much is done with it, and yet he doesn't want to he doesn't want it to be true. That's what's really interesting about the film. That the truth is staring him in the face. But that's what he believes, but he doesn't want it either, kind of thing. It's just a great kind of concept that the film goes with at the end.
Yeah, because it's the fact that he doesn't like humanity, he wants to escape it, and then he goes to a new planet, and I think his hope was he's going to meet a new civilization or whatever and be able to live amongst them. But then when he discovers that it's not safe for him because this new civilization doesn't like his kind, he is then having to see a way out. And I think a lot of it has to do with his ego, and he's kind of all into it for himself. I think, in my eyes, and people can disagree with me, I think the only reason he takes the woman with him is for his own pleasure. Like, and I don't think it's because he loves her or wants to save her. I think it's, I am on this new planet, I have to survive somehow, and I need satisfaction, or I need someone there with me who I can do whatever with. So she can't talk, and she really doesn't know how to make her own decisions. It's a weird and dark turn I just made, but I kind of makes sense. And I feel like there are others out there that are kind of seeing that as like, you may be right.
Funny and interesting lines then from Landon as he watches the ship sink. He says, "She's sinking, going, gone," which was interesting and kind of funny as well. Charlton Heston in the beginning as well to Landon. "You've gone grey. Apart from that, you look pretty chipper for a man who's 2031 years old. Flight is a scientific impossibility. Even if it weren't, why fly?" Where would it get you? From Zera. That was kind of funny as well. Have you got any, Parker?
I mean, I think my favorite is definitely the final line of the movie, which is most iconic, which is, "Oh my God, I'm back. I'm home." All the time it was, we finally really did it. And then he's like, "You maniacs, you blew it up. Ah, damn you. God damn you all to hell."
Yeah, that's great.
I won't use the other one. The other line is really good too, because that's when they first discover he can speak.
Oh, yeah.
And so but that line is used literally in almost every Planet of the Apes movie, which is pretty funny.
"Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape." Yeah, I love that line. How can you not?
But I think a lot of it has to do with when Taylor and Zaius are talking to each other. I think a lot of it, it's like a planet where apes evolved from men. There's got to be an answer. And Zaius goes, "Don't look for it, Taylor. You might not like what you find."
Yes. Yeah.
And then the Forbidden Zone was once a paradise. Your breed made it a desert of it ages ago. Like just these kind of like punches to the gut. Yeah. And then the last one would be when Zira and Taylor are talking, or I think it's Zira, Taylor, and Cornelius, and he's he ties up Dr. Zaius, and he's like, "Taylor, don't treat him like that." And he's like, "Why not?" And he's like, "It's humiliating." He's like, "What, the way you humiliated me? Walking me around on a leash?" And Cornelius is like, "That was different. We thought you were inferior." And he's like, "Now you know better."
You cut his brain up, you bloody baboon! From John Heston.
That was good. Yes, very good.
Oh, one I loved from John Heston as well, when they're like escaping to find the dig site, and he says, "Do you have any weapons? A gun?" The best, but we won't need them. I'm glad to hear it. I want one anyway. Is a good one. Oh, yeah. And a great one from Zira, and near the end where Heston's like, "Doctor, I'd like to kiss you goodbye." And she's like,
"Oh, so weird.
All right, but you're so damned ugly." And they kiss him anyway.
Because they show Cornelius in the background like,
"What the hell?"
I don't like this. Get away from my lady.
You're kissing an animal. What's going on? One that can speak as well. Screenplay score, Parker. What are you going for Planet of the Apes?
I'm going to give this an 8.
Okay. I
think the beginning of the movie is a little, I don't know how to say it without being negative, because I don't think it's bad. I think Taylor's kind of reaction to everything is a little too like evil mustache twirling ha 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 type thing.
Okay.
And then I think, he can have his, I dislike humanity, I wanted to escape humanity and see if there was something better out there, but he's just so cocky and just he's a dick. He's an absolute dick. And the way he like taunts the other survivors, like, talking to, to pretty much telling them, it's who cares? Like, pretty much who cares? That's ultimately what he's telling them. Like, it doesn't matter.
We're on this planet now. Earth is a long way away.
Yeah, exactly. And they're kind of reacting how you probably should react in this situation.
Yeah.
And he is just kind of like, "Nah, it's fine. It's something new. I'm excited for this. This is a new life."
Even though all we can see at the moment is desert and more desert.
Yeah. And the way he doesn't react to the fact that one of his pilots one of his crew people are dead.
Oh, well, let's get out.
Yeah. Well, it's like one of the astronauts put the flag down to kind of commemorate, and he kind of just completely blasts it. He's just like, "What's the point? No one's going to see it." It kind of sucks. Like, I just don't like how Taylor is portrayed. Yeah, it's very, very dark. I wish it was a little bit lighter. I don't think we needed total, cynicism there, but I think as the movie progresses, we get a different version of Taylor that I like, and the fact of him kind of truly reacting to his situation. I understand it's for reasonings of survival, but I feel that's kind of how most people would probably act when they're dealt with death or the potential of death. And I think the screenplay really brings that to life, and giving us kind of the true look at the apes and how they act and what they believe in and how they rule their society and what they think of humans. And I think it's all really well explained. There are some kind of comedic moments that are kind of goofy, like the jailbreak is pretty funny. I think the jailer who's there is kind of a goofball.
Yeah.
And it kind of takes me out of it for a second. And the way that they kind of,
especially when he's smoking a cigar as well,
Yeah. And they also like Three Stooges knock him out, and I thought that was pretty funny, and it kind of takes the tone away. But because then you immediately are going to seeing his other crewmen lobotomized, and you're like,
"Holy crap!"
Well, that took a drastically dark turn. I don't know how I feel about this. And then by the end, it is just dark. It is straight up pitch black.
Yeah.
Just the decisions that are made and knowing people's fates without seeing it. That's really dark. And it really, I think when a screenplay gets you thinking, even when the movie's over, I think it does a very good job. I just think there were some things that could have been eliminated or kind of tweaked.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it's a solid screenplay. So I'll give it an 8.
Cool. Yeah, I will definitely echo a lot of what you said. I kind of have a different view on the beginning. As I said, I kind of like the pace that it goes with, and that's certainly in the writing process as well. But I just find it kind of refreshing as well, and very different and intriguing that your main hero is kind of the asshole character, and the more typical hero gets lobotomized. And I find that really interesting that we're following this guy, and his ego is kind of, and his arrogance is being chipped away. Yes, for survival, but also just to figure out what is going on behind the scenes with what Dr. Zaius is telling his scientists. And I just kind of love this film and how, in Taylor's view, this kind of culture doesn't add up. Yes, on a very plain level that everything's upside down, but why are Zira and Cornelia so fascinated in Taylor, and yet Dr. Zaius is not, and yet he's supposed to be, the wisest of them all. So that was just really intriguing to watch. And yeah, as you go towards the end, watching it is kind of pretty easy to figure out that, yeah, this is Earth, even if you don't know anything about this film. And as I said, it's pretty impossible nowadays to not know that it is Earth, and to end it the way it ends with zero resolution is really brave and super dark, as you said, pitch black. Yeah, I really like that aspect. But I agree, yeah, there's definitely some goofy moments, but also there's a lot of humor here, which I really liked, which certainly plays on Charlton Heston's charisma. There's some great lines here, some incredibly iconic lines. So I'll go with an 8.6 for me, mainly for that really bold ending, the intrigue, and the iconic lines. So acting then. So Charlton Heston has a really interesting arc when he comes to his acting in this film. At the start, he's very calm and cool and collected, but quite arrogant when he comes to his opinions on Landon's philosophy on life. There's just a cool image of Charlton Heston in the desert, and he's in a spacesuit smoking a cigar, he couldn't be enjoying himself more as an actor. And then this arrogance turns to desperation when he can't talk, after he's been captured. Then his persona starts to come together again throughout the rest of the film when he starts piecing things together. But when he sees the Statue of Liberty, he couldn't be more devastated. People could see it as a tad over dramatic, but I still think it works under the circumstances. So as we've talked about, it could go either way of why he reacts like that. But I think also what we haven't talked about too much is when Charlton Heston can't speak. I think he does a kind of a great job there in those scenes. I don't think it could have been as highlighted as it could have been to show his acting skills off there, but I feel like they're focusing a lot more on the the actors playing apes. They did not use any real animals in this film, apart from the horses. Yeah, so yeah, I love Charlton Heston in this film. It just oozes charisma, and he really works incredibly well when his character can't talk either. So
yeah, the acting is my favorite part of this movie.
Okay.
It really is. I think because Charlton Heston, as I mentioned earlier, he just oozes charisma and energy, and he knows how to deliver every line with such dramatic gravitas, as I would say. And he's just so good at everything that he does. The fact that he does take that dramatic turn in the middle of the film when he can't talk and he's faced with the potential of death. It's so good though. He's so good at going from being just a piece of shit. he's not a fun character to watch in the beginning of this movie, but the way he kind of turns it all around and is just so good at just trying to persuade everybody into seeing things in a different lens, even if it doesn't work. But yeah, I got to give a lot of props to the actors who had to wear all those crazy prosthetics, playing the apes and putting on great performances. You know, Dr. Zaius and Zira. Roddy McDowell is it Cornelius, I think. He's Roddy McDowell, for anyone who doesn't know. He was in Fright Night, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vincent.
Yeah, I think their performances are great because you have the fact that they have to wear all those prosthetics, but they're still apes, so they're not walking around like people. Like they still have that kind of like hunched walk in a way. They're not walking on all fours, but they're you know, and they'll be able to kind of do that, and you have to take them seriously too. I think it's all done very well. But yeah, Charlton Heston. I think if you put anyone else in the lead, I don't know if it would have worked out as well.
Yeah.
I really don't. I think Charlton Heston was kind of perfect for this role and perfect for this world. So I'm for acting, I'm going to give it a 8.7.
8.7? Sure. Yeah, I think for me, my like favorite performance is Charlton Heston for sure. Just as we said, like that arc is pretty great. Who's your favorite performance for you, Parker?
Oh, Charlton Heston.
Easily.
Definitely 100%.
I think probably my favorite performance, though, in terms of who, you know, plays the ape characters is probably Kim Hunter. He's probably the best actor as an ape in the film for me, who plays Zira. Like, they don't have like a lot to work with under the makeup other than using their eyes. I think she certainly shines in the courtroom scenes, especially. Like, Roddy McDowell is really great as Cornelius, but for me, Kim Hunter gets the prize for best ape actor. Yeah, so acting score for me for Planet of the Apes. I don't know, like, yeah, Charlton Heston is great, and as you said, like, what's really interesting about the actors who are playing the apes, they are trying to be, they found a balance between acting as humanoids, as humans, but still, as you said, like, they're finding kind of a rhythm in how they walk to feel like they are actually apes as well in there. So that's a kind of a really interesting balance that they bring, and just the way they hold themselves as well. They're not always like stood up straight. They've always kind of got like a little bit of an arch to their posture, which I noticed this time around, which is really interesting. So yeah, I'll probably go like, I still think the screenplay I prefer the most though. So even though Heston is fantastic, I'll go like a 8.4 for me. Cool. Right, let's add up the scores then for the original Planet of the Apes movie. Planet of the Apes gets 49.2. Yeah, I don't think this is going to be tight. But it was really interesting talking about the original film. That's it for part 1. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out part 2 to see who wins. But don't stop there. Get involved and tell me what your favourite films are relating to the episode. Send us a DM or comment on Instagram and TikTok at Film vs. Film Podcast, for X at FVF_podcast. Plus, we are now on YouTube, so hit that like button and comment there. If you do, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Remember, please leave us a 5-star review and subscribe. Pod signing off.